The guard didn't greet me, didn't ask a question, didn't even pretend to be polite. He just lifted his hand slightly and said, flat and rehearsed, like a line from a training manual, "Step away from the vehicle." And for a moment, I honestly thought I had taken the wrong road. Two black security trucks were parked sideways across the dirt path, engines idling, blocking the only entrance like this was some kind of border checkpoint instead of a quiet ranch road outside a Texas town. One guard stood beside my window, his hand resting a little too casually near his holster. I stared past him, and that's when I saw the gate. 3 weeks earlier, there had been nothing there. Just dust, tire ruts, and a long stretch of dirt road that led to the 40 acres I had just bought. Now, there were fresh concrete posts, a steel gate with an electronic keypad, and a brand new metal sign bolted to the fence. Private road. HOA controlled access. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because sometimes something is so ridiculous your brain refuses to process it any other way. "This road goes to my property," I said. The guard shrugged. "Not anymore." And just like that, I realized something important. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a power play. What the guard didn't know, what the HOA didn't know, was that before buying that ranch, I had spent 6 years working in land use litigation, which meant the documents sitting in my glove compartment didn't just prove they were wrong. They proved they had just made a mistake that was about to cost them a lot of money. So instead of arguing, I pulled out my phone and started recording. Because moments like this, they tend to matter later. I'm 32 years old, and for most of my adult life, I worked in a field most people never think about. Environmental compliance, land use analysis, property rights. It sounds dull until you realize what it actually involves. Every day, I watch people fight over invisible lines on maps. Access roads, water rights, easements, 10 feet of driveway that determined whether a property was worth $1 million or nothing. And over those years, I noticed something that always bothered me. People with power often bend the rules. People without knowledge often lose everything. So when I finally saved enough money to buy land of my own, I knew exactly what I wanted. Not a townhouse, not a suburban lot squeezed between identical houses. I wanted land that breathed. 40 acres of quiet. After months of searching listings, I found it. An abandoned ranch sitting just outside a fast-growing town. The barn leaned slightly. The pasture had turned wild. The fencing sagged like it had been tired for years. But when I opened the legal documents, something caught my eye. Clear title. County survey. Recorded access easement. Most buyers saw an overgrown problem. I saw possibility. The first time I walked onto that land, the wind pushed through the tall grass like waves moving across water. An old windmill creaked slowly above a rusted trough. The place felt forgotten, but not dead. Just waiting. I remember standing there thinking about what it could become. A restored pasture. Maybe a small herd under the oak trees. A simple house someday on the hill. For the first time in years, the future felt quiet. At closing, the realtor mentioned something casually. "The access road runs through an HOA neighborhood," she said. But the ranch used that road decades before the subdivision existed. The easement was recorded with the county, which meant legally nothing could change that. Or at least that's what everyone assumed. The first few weekends were peaceful. I fixed fences, cleared brush, repaired the old water trough. By midday, the Texas sun burned the back of my neck while grasshoppers bounced through the weeds around my boots. But every repaired fence post made the land feel more alive. Local ranchers stopped by occasionally. "Angle that brace deeper," one old man told me. "Wind'll knock it sideways if you don't." They were the kind of people who respected effort more than introductions. But across the road, things were different. The subdivision looked like another world. Perfect lawns, matching houses, HOA patrol SUVs rolling slowly through the streets, checking hedge height and trash cans. Everything symmetrical. Everything controlled. From their sidewalks, some residents watched me working. Not waving, just observing. Like they weren't sure if the guy restoring the abandoned ranch was going to become a neighbor or a problem. That's when I met Elaine Foster. She pulled up one morning in a white SUV while I was tightening fence wire. She stepped out looking exactly like someone who ran neighborhood meetings for a living. Perfectly styled hair, pressed jeans, crisp blouse, sunglasses perched neatly on her head. "I'm Elaine Foster," she said, "president of the HOA across the road." I nodded politely. "Nice to meet you." She glanced down the road behind me. "You should know that road is HOA maintained," she said smoothly. "We expect cooperation from neighboring property owners." The sentence sounded polite, but underneath it was something else. "The access easement is recorded with the county," I replied. She watched me for a moment. Then she smiled. It was the kind of smile that never quite reaches the eyes. "That can change," she said. And then she left. At the time, the conversation lasted less than a minute. But sometimes the smallest warnings turn out to be the most important. 10 days later, I left town for work. When I came back, the steel gate was waiting. Security guards, cameras, signs claiming the road belonged to the HOA. Then the letters started arriving. Maintenance fees, violation notices, warnings about unauthorized agricultural activity. The irony was almost impressive. They had blocked access to my land and then fined me for activity on land I couldn't even reach. Rumors began spreading through the neighborhood. Industrial farming, heavy machinery, noise, threats to property values. And suddenly the strategy became clear. If they controlled the road, they control the ranch. Without access, 40 acres becomes landlocked, and landlocked land loses value fast. Eventually, someone might offer to solve the problem by buying it cheap. It was a classic pressure tactic, but they had underestimated one thing. They assumed I would panic. Instead, I started reading county plat records, subdivision filings, survey documents, and that's when the twist appeared. The ranch easement had been recorded 25 years before the subdivision existed. 25, which meant the developer had built the neighborhood knowing the road legally belonged to the ranch. The HOA had never had the authority to remove it. Not legally. Not ever. The moment I understood that the steel gate stopped feeling intimidating. It started looking reckless. I hired an attorney, a quiet one. His office sat above a hardware store downtown. He read the documents slowly, flipping through the pages, confirming dates. Then he leaned back. "You bought land," he said. "Yes." "And they blocked your legal access." "Yes." He tapped the easement document. "That's obstruction." The demand letter went out that afternoon. "Remove the gate, restore access, or face legal consequences." The HOA ignored it. So he escalated. 3 days later, I met a sheriff's deputy at the road entrance. Cool morning air, wind moving through the grass. And for the first time since the gate appeared, I didn't arrive alone. When the guards saw the patrol truck behind me, their posture changed immediately. Within minutes, Elaine and 2 board members arrived. The deputy studied the easement documents, compared the filing date to the subdivision plat. Then he looked up. "This easement predates your subdivision," he said calmly. Elaine tried to argue. "Our HOA voted to restrict. An HOA vote does not override a recorded easement." Silence. "You cannot block this road," the deputy continued. "If you continue obstructing access, it becomes an enforcement issue." The word enforcement hung in the air. Elaine looked at the other board members. Finally, she nodded. The keypad beeped. The steel lock disengaged, and the gate opened with a slow metallic creak. For the first time in weeks, the road to my ranch was clear. But the real consequences came later. 2 days after that confrontation, my attorney obtained the HOA financial records. And that's when the situation truly exploded. The board had spent $48,000 installing the gate and hiring security. $48,000 of homeowner dues. No legal opinion. No member vote. No authorization beyond the board itself. When residents learned their money funded a legally reckless stunt, the neighborhood erupted. The next HOA meeting was packed. Homeowners demanded answers. Did a lawyer approve this? Why didn't we vote on it? Why did our dues pay for private security to block a legal road? Suddenly, the pressure wasn't coming from me. It was coming from inside the community. Security patrols disappeared. The cameras came down. Contractors dismantled the steel gate. 3 board members resigned. Elaine held on for a few weeks, but eventually she stepped down too. The HOA settled the dispute. They reimbursed my legal costs. They signed an agreement permanently recognizing the easement. And the road stayed open. No guards, no cameras, just wind and dirt again. Months later, the ranch finally looked alive. The windmill turned again. Water filled the trough. A small herd of cattle grazed through the tall grass under the oak trees. Sometimes I sit on the tailgate of my truck at sunset, watching the pasture move in the wind, listening to the quiet that almost disappeared behind a steel gate. People sometimes ask if it felt good to win, but that's the wrong word. It felt steady, because this was never really about beating an HOA. It was about something older than that. Ownership. When you sign your name to a deed, you aren't just buying land. You're accepting responsibility, risk, and the right to decide what happens on that soil. If someone can take that right away just by sounding confident enough, then it was never secure to begin with. The HOA believed authority came from titles and votes. But authority has limits. Real power isn't loud. Sometimes it looks like paperwork. Patience. Standing still when you know the ground beneath your boots legally belongs to you. And that makes me wonder something. If an HOA believes it can ignore the law in order to protect property values, where exactly is the line between community governance and abuse of power? I'm curious what you think. Have you ever dealt with an HOA that tried to control something it didn't actually own? Tell me your story, because sometimes the quietest fights reveal the biggest truths about power land and how far people will go to control something that was never theirs.